Hi there.
Hi. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure. Hey, I was in high school in your shoes once. What school do you go to? What state?
Bayport High School. It's in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Aha. Okay. Fire away. I'm ready to answer anything you want to ask me.
Okay. First of all, growing up, did you ever see yourself becoming a director or working in the film industry?
I never wanted to be in the film industry. When I went to college, I was in pre-med, and I was born and raised in LA, right next to Hollywood. And it never occurred to me growing up that I was, you know, even interested in getting into show business. I loved going to movies. I loved when TV started. I loved watching it, but it never entered my mind that I would be a part of it.
So, how exactly did you
Like get
get?
into it.
Well, when I was going to college, I only went into pre-med, to be really honest with you, to please my parents. I have an older sister, and my parents sacrificed everything that they never had the opportunity to do, like go to college or anything. And so they devoted all their energy into my sister and I and made sure we got a good education, et cetera. So when I went into college, I started thinking about the rest of the time. My high school days, my junior high school, grammar school was playtime. I used to go. I lived a block away from a park, and I lived at that park. And just you know, after school, I'd head for the park, and then I had to be home at 7 o'clock for dinner because that's when there was a rule in our family that everybody had to sit down at the dinner table. And it was really a case that it was my mother who really knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I just was in it to please my parents. I hated in high school when they asked me to participate in dissecting a frog, and I didn't want to kill anything. I'm the kind of guy who will catch flies in the house and take them outdoors and let them go. Uh, but she read an article in the newspaper that the University of Southern California was starting a television film department. And so she said, "Why don't you take a few electives in that and see if you like it?" And I liked it so much that I became a radio announcer for the college radio station. And the next thing I know, the Korean War uh, was flaring up all over the country, and students all over were protesting the war. And a lot of guys tore up their draft cards and headed for Canada and so forth. And there was a lot of turmoil going on. And in college, I was in the Air Cadet program, and they asked me to I'd signed an agreement that I would be in it for 2 years. And because of the Korean War, they asked me to sign up for 4 years. And I refused. And as a result, I was drafted into the Army. And I was sent to, I won't bore you with the long story before that, but I was sent to Europe, and I became a radio announcer with George Clooney's dad. Nick Clooney was my buddy. And we were with the American Forces Radio Network in Europe, and I was stationed to begin with in Salzburg, Austria, and then I was transferred into Germany, where I was in Munich and Nuremberg, and there were just a handful of us, and we became very, very popular in Europe, especially behind the Iron Curtain. And I had met a lot of people while I was there, and one of them was a guy named Jerry Hausner. And Jerry Hausner was working for Radio Free Europe. And he was an actor, and he was on a lot of Lucille Ball shows in America. I Love Lucy. And he was best friends with Jim Backus, kind of a very famous actor in the 50s and 60s. And Backus, if you ever heard of it, but the Mr. Magoo cartoons. And he was Jim Backus was Mr. Magoo, and Jerry Hausner was his sidekick. And this was a character who was very short-sighted and could hardly see anything, kept bumping into walls and objects. It was a very well-accepted film short in America. And anyway, Jerry introduced me to Backus, and Backus was a regular actor on a very successful series called Gilligan's Island. And I directed two of Gilligan's Islands, as a matter of fact, when I came back, because I wanted to learn. Television had electronic cameras, and I wanted to learn film. So Gilligan's Island was shot on 35 millimeter film, and it gave me a great opportunity to work with a great director of photography, DP, cinematographer, named Dick Rollins, and he taught me a whole bunch about film cameras, and that launched my career. I dropped out of school in my senior year, and I thought I'd go back eventually, but once I got into the business, I never stopped working. So there was no opportunity to go back, though I've been given honorary doctorates by various universities and colleges. And so that's my story. It's very unique because I started in the mailroom just as a summer job when I got back from Europe, and never intended on staying in the mailroom, even though in order to get the job, I had to promise the guy who hired me that I never wanted to do anything in life other than work for him and deliver mail around the ABC lot. And I met the program director delivering mail, and he asked me about myself. It was lunchtime and he had nothing to do, so he was just in his office hanging out. And we became fast friends. And next thing I know, he said, "I've got a summer job as a director. Have you ever directed anything?" And I said, "No." He said, "Would you like to take a shot at it?" And he said, "I got a feeling about you, Steve." And I went to meet the director who was supposed to train me. And I think in a couple of weeks, I knew the job better than he did. And he'd been there for a couple of years doing it. And that launched my career. I first show I was lucky enough to direct was a slapstick comedy named Soupy Sales, which was a huge hit with high schools and college students all over America. And Soupy used to wear a big top hat and a bow tie and a sweater, and he had two imaginary dogs, which this other actor used to stand on a small ladder about 3 feet tall, and he'd wear a dog paw. One was white and one was black, and it was White Fang and Black Tooth. And he would put the paw into the camera frame, and so your imagination would think the dog was like 10 feet tall. And Super used to talk to the dogs all the time. White Fang, I think, was the good dog, and Black Tooth was the one always getting into trouble. And Soupy was really famous for his pie throwing, and going back to the old days of original slapstick with the Max Sennett comedies and Charlie Chaplin and so forth. And all our pies were shaving cream in a paper pie holder, and with whipped cream. And then we had a sound effects guy off stage who every time Soupy would throw one of these in somebody's face, he would fire off a fake gun with a 1/4 inch load, and just the impact of the sound with the pie was a huge hit. And I then went on to direct a late night show for one of the most famous comedy hosts in America at the time, named Steve Allen. And I brought the pie throwing to the Steve Allen show in prime time, and people loved it. I mean, we used to get these pompous actors who wanted to brag about themselves, and at a critical time of their interviews with Steve, we would hit him with a pie. And I remember one time, Jerry Lewis, when he was invited to do the show, he said on one condition, and I knew Jerry pretty well by then, and he said, one condition is that Steve not throw a pie at me because I just bought a brand new, $1,500 suit, and I don't want to get it ruined and so forth. And so I promised the star of the show, Steve Allen, that I wouldn't throw a pie. And they started the interview on his show, and it got terrible. Where Jerry was saying, "I did this, I did that, I produced it, I directed it, I was the actor, I was everything," and it got so bad that I told the stage manager to get a pie ready because we're going to throw it anyway, and we did. And for a split second, I could see on the close-up camera that he wanted to kill me. And then he got down on the floor as a comedian, and he started licking the whipped cream and the shaving cream from the fake pie, and the audience was screaming. They were laughing so loud, and being a comedian, that was magic and music to a comedian's ear. And Jerry just continued, uh, you know, on lying on the floor, licking the floor and the pie. And it was funny because after it was over, he came up and thanked me, saying it was one of the funniest things he ever did in his career. And so, it not only for me was never a job. I mean, I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and head for the studio, uh, because I loved doing the work so much. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about the money or I just uh, enjoyed and couldn't believe the fantasy that I was living in. And it lasted my whole career. I mean, I have never, I said when I stop enjoying doing what I'm doing, I'm going to quit. And especially now, I can retire, but I don't want to because I'm enjoying it so much.
So, what would you say, or who would you say was your biggest influence?
My biggest influence were my crews. Every cameraman, every sound man. I never played the social side of show business. I never spent time with executives or went to their parties or anything. Uh, to this day, my best friends, because every time you work on a show, you're creating a new second family from your own. And it's a very high when you start work and you're doing the show, but then you hit the lows when all of a sudden you have to say goodbye and move on and find another show to do. And in a way, it's really sad when you say goodbye because you became so close to everybody in a very short period of time. And fortunately, in my career, because most careers burn out after 2 or 3 years, but in my career, I never had time to stop and smell the roses. I was working all the time and went from one show to another through almost 5 decades, and all different types of shows because I never wanted to be typecast. And if you're a director who basically works on a sitcom, uh, and you're lucky enough to be on a show that lasts for maybe 4 or 5 years, which is very rare in the business. Uh, it's a wonderful job, but it's repetitive. You just do the same thing week in and week out. And I never wanted that for me. I wanted to do different things. And fortunately, I got the opportunity in my career to travel practically all over the world. And, uh, one of uh, the last specials in the last decade I did for Disney was with Michelle Kwan, the ice skater. And, uh, and I worked with a lot of Olympic ice skaters for Disney. And one of them was with Christy Yamaguchi and Kurt Browning, who both were gold medalists in the Olympics. And we went to Cairo, Egypt, and we did Aladdin in Egypt, where they had never seen an ice rink before. And it was a wonderful experience, I mean, living next to the Nile River, I mean, it was a fantasy. And it it this business, the word for the industry is show business. And I've come to realize that they're two separate words with two separate meanings. There are those of us that really focus on the show side of it, and then there's the whole business world. And I tried, to stay out of the business, even though I know how important it is, and nothing gets done creatively without the deal being made and so forth. But I hung out with my crews all the time. To this day, I have some of my best friends are guys that I work with. In fact, my best friend is one of the great technical directors in television. And we did Diana Ross in Central Park during the big rainstorm. And Keith Winikoff, you'll see his name on 100, huge shows as the technical director. And he even goes to Japan to work with the Japanese manufacturers before they send their equipment to the United States, for Sony or whoever. And they want, an expert opinion before they send it. And Keith is the guy that they usually call and say, come over and see what we're about to send to your country and so forth. So, I've had the opportunity to work with such great people. And I find when you're in high school and college, it's a great opportunity to meet all these people while being a student, because we all have egos, and we are flattered when somebody calls up and saying, I'm doing a school assignment and I want to come out and interview you. You can interview presidents of companies and they like the ego stroke that you give them, and they're turning down professional people left and right who want to meet them or be interviewed by them, but seldom do they reject a student. And I've taught at the University of Southern California for maybe 30 years, television directing and producing class. And I have an army of students who took my class and still try to stay in touch with me. And my advice to students is don't listen to anybody. You can listen to what they have to tell you or advise you, but you got to make up your own mind. And if you're a follower, if you just want to do anything to please anybody, you're probably going to fail, because even though they love you when you're working with them, the people they really respect are the people who really have a vision and stand up for that vision. And I think, for every person who never wanted to work with me again, for whatever reason, fortunately, there was always somebody who did want to work with me. And I've had the greatest opportunities to do the most interesting, different variety shows because I love music. I mean, that is, I don't just listen to the melodies. I listen to the words, because I think the songwriters of today are the poets of yesterday. And you know, I'm not a great fan of rap, I will admit, but I love the, you know, the Stings and the Springsteens and you know, the myriad of great you know, Joni Mitchell, uh, you know, great songwriters. When I did a special with Petula Clark and Harry Belafonte, who are huge international stars, uh, Harry brought me Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. And people may not realize it, but even before they made the first recording of it, and Joni even made her recording of it, Harry Belafonte sang it on television on the Petula Clark special. And, you know, when I first started in the industry, there was a huge separation between people who were in television and then those that were in the music business. And they kind of never spoke to each other or invited each other to their parties or what have you. And now, fortunately, it's kind of merging together. And, you know, I, I actually, and I can say this with all honesty, I created Dancing with the Stars. I pitched it to ABC, uh, you know, at least 3 years before it ever went on the air, uh, basically with all the people they put on the air with it when they did, and I never got credit for it nor paid for a penny for it, etc. But uh, the point is that when I pitched it earlier, uh, and the exact concept, there was one dance show on public broadcasting that was from England, and it was ballroom dancing. And then, of course, Baz Luhrmann, who just did the Presley movie, he did his first film in Australia called Strictly Ballroom, and that was a relatively successful show. But it was basically a middle of the road. You know, older people tuned in to see it and so forth. And this executive that I approached at ABC, which is the one network airing Dancing with the Stars, he said, "Steve, as long as you and me are alive, we'll never see a dance show aired in primetime television." And what a genius he was. And so, you know, for me, there are no roadblocks. I mean, no matter how many times you hear the word no, which is spoken often in the industry, or rejection, you've got to be blinded to that. You have to say, you know, I've got a great idea. I believe in it. I believe in myself, and I'm going to make it happen. And those are the winners. Those are the people who are successful. And then everybody jumps on the bandwagon. All the people who are negative immediately, hey, I know that person who came in and pitched it, and I'm friends with them, and I'm going to call them and congratulate them, you know, and so forth, just to keep the door open and the relationship. So, are all of you interested in an entertainment career, or is it something you're just kind of toying with right now?
Yeah, we are.
Well, there's a wonderful booklet at the Directors Guild of America, and it was written by a very famous director, and you should try and see many of his films if you can, named Ilya Kazan. And Ilya Kazan, one of his most famous films with Marlon Brando starring in it, was On the Waterfront, dealing with the unions and what have you. But Ilya Kazan wrote an essay while he was teaching at Weimar University, talking on what makes a director. And even though you have a focus on what you think you want to do in your adulthood, try and be exposed to everything, to life, you know. And the more experiences you have that you bring to a studio or a stage as a director, the more knowledge you have, in terms of the weather, when you're directing actors, especially, and you want to know what time of year the scene takes place in, so that'll tell them how they should dress. You want to travel as much as you possibly can, and while you're a student, even if you go to Europe or Asia or whatever, you can buy and live very, very cheaply, on the rail systems, which are much better than ours in many foreign countries, have all these student deals and so forth. So, but I never try and direct any actor until they get in trouble and they ask for your advice. I'm not telling them how to act. They know that a hell of a lot better than I do. And, it's really a case of advising them when they're mentally blocked and they can't, they need to unblock. And when you're professionally working, you have to realize that all the people you hire, the costume designer, the prop master, the writers, the set decorator, they know a lot more about their specific craft than you do. But you should have an education so you can talk to them, you communicate with them. And therefore, the more knowledge you can pick up. Like when it came to cameras, I was able, when I started out of the mailroom, I was only allowed to do a one camera show. And you can do a lot with one camera. It's kind of amazing, but you don't know that till you do it. And then all of a sudden you're allowed to have two cameras and then eventually three cameras. And when you become successful, it's unlimited when they say, what do you need equipment wise and so forth. And in my opinion, they've even gone overboard with that because some directors, if they're on the Comedy Channel and doing a stand-up comedy routine with a famous comedian, they request 30 cameras. How can you use more than two or three cameras on one body standing on a mark on the stage where he or she stands the entire routine? But they figure out how to do it, in terms of where they want to put all their cameras and so forth. But I'm very stingy when it comes to camera cutting. Without some kind of motivation, I don't want to change camera angles. I've shot a lot of my stars, Diana Ross, Olivia Newton-John, so many of them from beginning to end on one camera. And I learned that from getting a good basic foundation and education from my camera crews and my technical crews. And I'm not a cutter. I don't, get in the control booth. And I remember working for VH1 when they did a Diva show with Mariah Carey, Diana Ross, Donna Summers, Faith Hill, and they were bragging that they're the music channel, and they know how to do music better than anybody else, etc. And we won a lot of camera cuts. I said, you picked the wrong director, even though they didn't pick me. Diana Ross insisted that she use me, or they use me. And I only cut when I feel motivated to cut, and make sure that the artist is given as much freedom as they possibly. There are no rules when I direct. When I directed Elvis Presley, I didn't tell him where to stand or where. Usually you put a piece of tape on the floor. That's where you start, and then you put another piece of tape on the floor and say you can move to that position, because everybody was so concerned about the lighting. You have to be fully lit for their faces, and I never believed in that. I wanted realism, and I told Elvis, when he was in this kind of boxing stage uh,
That we saw.
without the ropes,
Yeah.
I said, do whatever you feel instinctively that you want to do, and don't worry about cameras. I'll be there. I'll get you, you know. And it turned out wonderfully. And he was totally relaxed. I think he even forgot he was doing a television special. He was having so much fun, especially in the improvisation segment of the show, where he was with his old friends from his past, DJ Fontana, his drummer, and Scotty Moore, his guitarist. And they were doing what they were doing when they were 19 years old and just starting out in the business. And they didn't have to rehearse anything. They already knew how to have fun and play their guitars and drums and what have you. And it was kind of giving the artist the freedom to feel relaxed and do whatever they feel they want to do. And everything's different, and that's what I love about it. I love that every show is a whole beginning, middle, and end, and you're starting all over again trying to figure it out. And I was never intimidated by anyone. I never put him on a pedestal or treated him any different. He was just a guy trying to do his best work, and I was trying to do my best work, and we were collaborating, and that's the message that I got over to him, and he bought it. And he did everything and anything I asked him to do. In fact, I was a little nervous because every star at least has some opinion about how about changing that, or I don't want to do this, and Elvis never once challenged anything that I was doing. He loved it all, and he so it's just, we're all human. We all are the same people. I mean, we react similarly. Uh, our instincts. You got to trust yourself. You have to trust your instincts.
Thank you. Um, what are some big differences that you've noticed in the film industry since you started?
Well, to me, it's all what is expressed in the master shot, what I'm feeding out to the public. And it really is a case of where, from the time I started, where they had no filters for electronic cameras, they had no handheld cameras. I mean, by leaps and bounds, the technical side of the business has grown so much since I started. And you have equipment that it wasn't available to me when I started, of equipment that's mobile, and it's not, doesn't weigh a ton. So I remember when the first handheld camera came out, I think I used the first one in entertainment on the Presley special, which I borrowed from the sports department who had just gotten theirs. Uh, it weighed a ton, and the poor cameraman, I'm sure his back, by the time he finished the show, I'm sure he was recuperating quite a while, because he was under such stress and physical pain from the size of this handheld. Now, a 5-year-old can hold a handheld camera and pan it around and so forth. So I think there's leaps and bounds, but it still goes back to basics. It goes back to when I started. If you can't make an audience laugh, cry, physically, emotionally react to what you're entertaining them with, I don't care how much money they spend on the production. You can have a multi-million-dollar feature film and it bombs because the audience gets up and, there's no after response. There's no memory of it. It just was, I probably wasted my whatever they charge for a movie, $7-8, by even going to see it. There are things now on television, because when I started, movie stars never did television. television stars were never elevated to do movies, and now it's all one. And there's some things on television that are better than films made specifically for the big screen, and vice versa. And how do you compare a $1 million production compared to a $5,000 production and submit it for an award in the Emmys and so forth? It's the emotion of what you're projecting to the audience to get them to feel something, to react. And that's all I care about when I'm working. I put myself in the place of what if I were home watching what I'm now telling them they should be watching in terms of close-ups, medium shots, long shots, etc. And if you forget about the director, if you forget about the cameras, you're just into the plot, whether it's musical or dramatic. That's what you strive for. That once you start noticing, wow, this director is really creative. Look at the angles that the camera shots are. You've lost them, in my opinion. It's important to communicate. Life is communication.
Awesome. Thanks for letting us interview you.
Yeah. Our timer on our call is running out because
we don't have the premium
version.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 100% plus in I don't evaluate anything by how old you are, how much money you have, or anything. I just I love people and animals. And I just look for the positive, whatever I'm involved in. There's so many naysayers and people who are in life who are just down on everything. And I've loved life. I've loved being part of it for so long, and and I hope I continue on until I'm not here anymore. But I've just been blessed, and I want to express and encourage you, go for your dreams. I mean, don't listen to any negativity or people saying you can't do this or whatever. And if it's in your soul, if it's your passion, go for it,
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It is about to run out, like a couple of seconds.
We know your birthday was 2 days ago. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
See you later. Okay. Bye-bye.